I still remember the exact moment my world shattered. The boardroom fell silent as my father stood at the head of the table, that familiar, smug smile spreading across his face. It gives me great pleasure to announce the next chapter for Hunter Medical Innovations. My son, Trevor, will be taking over as CEO effective immediately. 12 years of 80-hour weeks, countless innovations, growing our company from nearly bankrupt to a $50 million industry leader, all erased with 19 words. I felt every executive's eyes dart nervously between my father, Trevor's entitled grin, and my face. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. They were about to learn exactly who built this company and what happens when you betray the person who created your success. I joined Hunter Medical Innovations 12 years ago, fresh out of MIT with an engineering degree and an MBA from Stanford. While most of my classmates headed to Silicon Valley or Wall Street, I chose to come back to my hometown of Boston. Hunter Medical had been my father's pride and joy since he founded it 40 years earlier. The company had been revolutionary in its early days, but by the time I joined, it was struggling to stay relevant with barely $2 million in annual revenue and products that hadn't been updated in over a decade. Dad had built the company from scratch with innovative surgical tools, but medical technology had evolved dramatically while Hunter Medical stagnated. When I walked through the doors on my first day, I wasn't treated as the founder's daughter, but as an entry-level project manager. Dad believed in earning your place, which I respected. But I quickly realized the company needed a complete transformation to survive. We need to pivot toward non-invasive monitoring technology, I told my father during my 3rd month. The future isn't in surgical tools anymore. It's in preventative medicine and continuous monitoring. Dad frowned, leaning back in his creaky office chair. Ilene, we're a surgical tool company. That's our identity. That's what Hunter Medical has always been. And that's why we're dying, I said bluntly. $2 million in annual revenue when we used to do 10? Our competitors are all developing monitoring systems. We need to adapt. After weeks of presentations, market research, and practically begging, Dad finally gave me a small budget to develop a prototype, non-invasive glucose monitoring system. I assembled a team of 3 engineers who believed in my vision, and we worked nights and weekends for 9 months straight. The day we successfully tested our prototype was the day everything changed. Our monitor was more accurate and comfortable than anything on the market. I couldn't wait to share our success. That weekend, my parents hosted their annual company gala at their home. I hadn't seen my younger brother Trevor in months since he'd been away at business school. He'd always been Dad's favorite, the son who would someday take over the family business, despite showing little interest in it beyond the potential future title. Dad stood proudly with his arm around Trevor as he made an announcement to the room full of employees and industry contacts. I'm proud to announce that Trevor will be joining us next month after completing his MBA. And his first project will be launching our revolutionary new glucose monitor that's going to put Hunter Medical back on the map. My champagne glass nearly slipped from my fingers. I looked at Trevor, who seemed equally surprised but quickly recovered, smiling and accepting congratulations from the guests. Later that night, I confronted my father in his study. That was my project, my team. 9 months of work, and you're handing the launch to Trevor, who hasn't even set foot in the company yet? Dad waved his hand dismissively. Don't be so sensitive, Ilene. It's a family business. Everyone contributes. And Trevor needs a win to establish himself. You're already respected for your technical skills. He needs to build his leadership profile. Leadership profile? I repeated incredulously. He hasn't led anything. He's a natural leader, Dad insisted. Always has been. You're brilliant with the technical details, but Trevor has the charisma this company needs at the top. I left the study feeling hollow, but something made me stop outside the door when I heard another voice. My Uncle George, Dad's brother, and business partner. Don't you think you're being a bit obvious, Frank? Ilene's going to figure out what you're doing. What's to figure out? My father replied. We always planned for Trevor to take over. Just because Ilene decided to join the company doesn't change the succession plan we made years ago. At the family meeting, Uncle George said quietly, "Don't you think you're being a bit obvious, Frank? Eileen's going to figure out what you're doing." In that moment, something shifted inside me. If I couldn't change their minds, I would change the game entirely. I left the study feeling hollow, but something made me stop outside the door when I heard another voice. My Uncle George, Dad's brother, and business partner. That night in my hotel room, I made a decision that would alter the course of my career and the company's future. I called Sarah Jennings, a patent attorney I'd met at Stanford. "I need to protect my innovations," I told her. "How do I ensure that what I create remains mine, even while working for my family's company?" In that moment, something shifted inside me. If I couldn't change their minds, I would change the game entirely. The glucose monitor launch was a success despite Trevor taking all the credit. Standing on stage at the medical device convention, he spoke confidently about his vision while I watched from the audience. But the industry people knew better. They sought me out after the presentation with technical questions Trevor couldn't answer. The family meeting. 5 years ago. The one I wasn't invited to because I was too busy with school. That's when I realized this wasn't just about one product launch. This was about a decision made long ago that my contributions, no matter how significant, would never change the company's predetermined leadership path. Why does Trevor have an executive title when he barely shows up to meetings? Laura asked me one day after Trevor waltzed in 45 minutes late to an important production discussion, scrolled through his phone the entire time, then left early for golf. Sarah walked me through the process. "Your employment contract is the first thing we need to review. Then, we'll create a strategic plan for any new innovations moving forward." "Because his last name is Hunter," I replied simply. My employment contract, drafted when I was naive and trusting, gave the company rights to my work. But for future innovations, Sarah helped me establish a separate research LLC that would develop and patent new technologies, then license them to Hunter Medical. It was all legal, all above board. But it gave me leverage my father never anticipated I would need. Instead, my father used it to announce a board restructuring, to guide our continued growth. He said with that same smug smile, "We're expanding the board from 5 to 9 members. The 4 new members? Trevor's business school friend Scott, his former fraternity brother Alex, Dad's golf buddy William, and Trevor himself." The message couldn't have been clearer. My technical contributions were valued, but I would never have control. Instead, my father used it to announce a board restructuring. "North Star Medical is very interested in acquiring Hunter," the stranger said. "Your glucose monitoring line has proven quite successful, and with the cardiac prototype we've heard about, the acquisition value could be substantial." My heart raced. The cardiac monitoring system was still in early development, my most ambitious project yet. And they were discussing a sale without even consulting me? "We're not looking to sell right now," my father replied. "But we appreciate North Star keeping the channels open. Perhaps in a few years, once Trevor is established as CEO, and the transition is complete." I backed away silently, my mind racing. Not only were they planning to install Trevor as CEO, but they were potentially planning to sell the company I was rebuilding, the company that was growing because of my innovations. That evening, working late, I overheard voices from my father's office. The door was slightly ajar, and I recognized the voices of my father, Trevor, and someone unfamiliar. By year 3 of my new strategy, Hunter Medical hit $15 million in annual revenue. The board meeting that announced this milestone should have been triumphant. That night, I called Sarah again. "We need to accelerate our strategy," I told her. "And I need to know exactly where I stand, legally, with everything I've developed so far." The technology required expertise in bioelectrical sensors, machine learning algorithms, and miniaturized electronics. I recruited additional engineers, spent countless nights in the lab, and invested my entire bonus in prototype development. The personal cost was high. My fiancé broke off our engagement after I missed yet another dinner with his parents. Your heart's not in this relationship, Ilene. It's in that lab, he said, as he returned the ring. He wasn't wrong. The cardiac monitor became my obsession, my redemption project. If I created something truly groundbreaking, surely my father would see my value. When we finally achieved the breakthrough, the results exceeded even my expectations. Our clinical trials showed 98% accuracy in predicting cardiac events 4 to 6 hours before they occurred. Medical journals published our findings. Hospital systems began calling us rather than the other way around. Hunter Medical's valuation soared to $35 million. Industry publications featured our company's remarkable turnaround. I was invited to speak at medical technology conferences across the country. The next 2 years were the most challenging and rewarding of my career. While navigating the increasingly complex family business politics, I focused on developing what would become Hunter Medical's defining product, a revolutionary cardiac monitoring device that could detect arrhythmias and potential heart attacks hours before conventional symptoms appeared. Later that evening at the conference reception, I was speaking with the chief of cardiology from Mayo Clinic when my father interrupted. Dr. Reynolds, I see you've met my daughter. Has she introduced you to our executive team? Trevor Hunter, our VP of Strategic Development, will be spearheading the hospital partnership program for the cardiac monitoring system. Dr. Reynolds looked confused. I was under the impression Ilene was leading that initiative. We've been discussing implementation details for weeks. At one such conference in San Francisco, the host introduced me as the innovative force behind Hunter Medical's renaissance. I could see my father shifting uncomfortably in his seat in the audience. Trevor wasn't even there, having decided a bachelor party in Vegas took precedence over our company's industry recognition. After Dr. Reynolds walked away, I confronted my father. Why would you undermine me like that? I've been working with Dr. Reynolds for months. Trevor has never even met him. The next 2 years were the most challenging and rewarding of my career. While navigating the increasingly complex family business politics, I focused on developing what would become Hunter Medical's defining product, a revolutionary cardiac monitoring device that could detect arrhythmias and potential heart attacks hours before conventional symptoms appeared. Groomed? He hasn't earned anything. When was the last time he even attended a product development meeting? Dad's face hardened. This isn't about attendance records, Ilene. It's about vision and presence. Trevor connects with people. He understands the big picture. The big picture of what? A company he's barely involved in? Something flashed in my father's eyes then. Something I'd never seen before. Vulnerability. For a brief moment, his hand moved to his chest, rubbing slightly. Are you okay? I asked, my anger momentarily forgotten. Fine, he snapped, composing himself. Just indigestion. We'll discuss this another time. I'm not undermining you, he replied, his voice low. I'm establishing the chain of command. You need to accept that while your contributions are valuable, Trevor is being groomed for leadership. Her hesitation told me everything. He doesn't want anyone to know, she finally admitted. Especially not at the company. He's been having some heart issues. Nothing serious yet, but the doctor wants him on medication and reduced stress. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was developing technology to predict heart attacks while being completely blindsided by my father's cardiac condition. It explained his urgency to establish Trevor in a leadership role. He was preparing for a succession he feared might come sooner than planned. This realization should have softened my resentment, but then came the conversation that changed everything. I was working late again when Jason from engineering asked to speak with me privately. I had a weird meeting today, he said, looking uncomfortable. Trevor and your dad called me in to ask detailed questions about your cardiac monitoring algorithms. Not the overview stuff we present to the board. They wanted the proprietary details, the stuff that only you and the core development team know. What did you tell them? That they should talk to you. But Ilene, they said they needed to protect the company's intellectual property. Trevor mentioned something about ensuring the technology was secure for the transition. Ice formed in my stomach. What transition? Jason shrugged. He didn't elaborate, but they had a lawyer with them. Someone from Andrews and Porter. Not our usual firm. Andrews and Porter specialized in intellectual property litigation. There was only one reason to bring them in. They were preparing to challenge my ownership of the patents and technology I'd developed through my LLC. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m, I drove back to the office to retrieve some files. The building was dark, except for a light in the conference room. Voices drifted down the hallway. My father and Trevor. Once the transition is complete, we'll need to restructure the R&D department, Trevor was saying. Ilene's built too much loyalty there. They report to her, not to the company. One step at a time, my father replied. First, we secure the CEO position. Then we can address the Ilene situation. The lawyers think we have a strong case that all her work belongs to Hunter Medical, regardless of her LLC arrangement. And if she fights it? Trevor asked. There was a long pause. She won't, my father finally said. Family loyalty will win out in the end. And if not, we're prepared to do what's necessary. The company comes first. Always has. I backed away silently, my heart pounding. The Ilene situation. That's what my 12 years of dedication had become. A problem to be managed. An obstacle to be removed. In that moment, all lingering hope that my father would eventually recognize my contributions vanished. This wasn't about earning my place anymore. This was about survival, mine, and the future of everything I'd built. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in years. Instead of going to the office, I drove to Sarah's law firm in downtown Boston. Her assistant's eyes widened when I walked in without an appointment. But Sarah waved me into her office immediately. They're planning to force me out, I said without preamble, and they're going to try to claim ownership of everything I've developed. Sarah listened calmly as I recounted what I'd overheard. When I finished, she opened a drawer and pulled out a thick folder labeled Hunter Medical Technologies versus Ilene Hunter LLC. I've been preparing for this possibility for 3 years, she said. That's my job, to anticipate worst-case scenarios. She laid out documents showing the clear separation between my employment at Hunter Medical and the innovations I'd developed through my LLC. The licensing agreements were airtight. The patents were in my name or my LLC's name, not the company's. What about the work I did before setting up the LLC? I asked. The glucose monitor? That's Hunter Medical property, she confirmed. But everything after we established your LLC is protected. Your cardiac monitoring system, the predictive analytics platform, the miniaturized sensor technology, those are yours. You've licensed them to Hunter Medical, but you can revoke those licenses with 30 days' notice according to the agreement your father signed. He probably didn't read the fine print, I said, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. No, he read it, Sarah corrected me. I remember his lawyer calling me about that specific clause. But at the time, the idea that you would ever revoke the licenses probably seemed unimaginable to him. And the technology wasn't proven yet. Now it's the cornerstone of the company's growth. Over the next month, I methodically prepared for what I increasingly believed was inevitable. I met privately with each member of my core team, without explicitly discussing my plans. If you ever left Hunter Medical, what would you do next? I asked Jason during a coffee run. He didn't hesitate. I'd follow you. The real innovation is happening because of you, not the Hunter name. Similar conversations with Laura and Marcus confirmed what I'd hoped. Their loyalty was to the vision and leadership I provided, not to the company structure. I also reached out to key clients. ostensibly to discuss implementation updates for our monitoring systems. In each conversation, I subtly assessed their attachment to Hunter Medical versus their relationship with me personally. "If you ever left Hunter Medical, what would you do next?" I asked Jason during a coffee run. "He probably didn't read the fine print," I said, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. As we approached this milestone, rumors of a big announcement began circulating. The board scheduled a special meeting for the following Monday. No agenda was distributed in advance, an unusual departure from protocol. "Working with you has transformed our cardiac care program," Dr. Reynolds from Mayo Clinic told me. "The company provides the technology, but your understanding of our clinical needs is what makes the partnership valuable." "Big day Monday," he said, leaning against my doorframe with casual confidence. "Dad's really excited about the announcement." "What announcement?" I asked, continuing to review the clinical data on my screen. Trevor smirked. "You'll find out with everyone else. But let's just say it's time for some changes around here. The company's grown up, and the leadership should reflect that." "Grown up thanks to whose work?" I asked, finally looking up at him. The Friday before the board meeting, Trevor stopped by my office. He rarely ventured into the R&D wing of the building, preferring the executive suite my father had given him when he officially joined the company. After he left, I sat staring at my computer screen, not really seeing it. The condescension in his tone, the assumption that I would simply accept whatever they had planned, it was the final confirmation of what I already knew. That weekend, I made my final preparations. I reviewed contracts, backed up data, and met with Sarah one last time to ensure everything was in order legally. On Sunday night, I drove to my parents' house for our monthly family dinner, wondering if it would be the last one. My father looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. He took medication with his water when he thought no one was watching. My mother hovered nearby, her worried glances at him not nearly as subtle as she thought. "Big day tomorrow," he said as we ate dessert. "The company's about to enter a new era." "So I've heard," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. He studied me for a moment. "I hope you understand that every decision I've made has been for the good of the company and the family." "Have they been good for both equally?" I asked. "Or has one taken priority?" He frowned. "They're one and the same, Ilene. The company is the family legacy. A legacy built on what? Or more importantly, on whom?" My father waved his hand dismissively. "We all contribute in our own ways. That's what makes a family business work." Later, as I was leaving, my mother walked me to my car. "Your father's been under a lot of stress lately," she said quietly. "The doctors are concerned about his heart. Whatever happens tomorrow, please remember he's not as strong as he pretends to be." I hugged her tightly. "I'll remember, Mom." On Monday morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. As I walked to my office, I noticed a printout left on the copying machine. It was a draft press release with tomorrow's date. Hunter Medical Innovations announces leadership transition. Trevor Hunter named CEO. Continuing family legacy of innovation. Hunter Medical Innovations, the groundbreaking medical technology company recently valued at $50 million, announced today that Trevor Hunter has been named Chief Executive Officer, succeeding founder Frank Hunter, who will transition to chairman of the board. Trevor Hunter, who has been the mastermind behind the company's explosive growth from a niche surgical tool manufacturer to a leader in predictive medical monitoring systems, brings a unique vision for the company's future. I didn't need to read more. The narrative was clear. Trevor, the mastermind behind innovations he had barely participated in, would take credit for everything I had built. In that moment, standing alone in the copy room, I made my final decision. What happened next would change everything, not just for me, but for the entire company. The boardroom filled quickly that Monday morning. In addition to the 9 board members, key executives had been invited to witness the special announcement. My core team, Jason, Laura, and Marcus, sat together near the back, occasionally glancing at me with questioning eyes. I had given them no indication of what I suspected was coming, or what I planned to do. My father entered last, Trevor following closely behind him. They both wore new suits, and matching Hunter Medical blue ties a detail that didn't escape my notice. The coordinated image of father and son, of current and future leadership, was clearly intentional. "Good morning, everyone," my father began, his voice strong despite his pallor. "This is a momentous day for Hunter Medical Innovations. 12 years ago, we were struggling to maintain relevance in a rapidly changing industry. Today, we stand on the cusp of $50 million in valuation, with technologies that are revolutionizing predictive medicine. Additionally," I said, "our 10 largest client relationships, including Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, and Johns Hopkins, were cultivated through my personal efforts and are maintained through my ongoing involvement. Success like this requires vision. It requires leadership. And most importantly, it requires careful planning for the future. That's why today, it gives me great pleasure to announce the next chapter for Hunter Medical Innovations. My son, Trevor, will be taking over as CEO effective immediately." The room fell silent. All eyes darted between my father, Trevor's triumphant smile, and me. I kept my expression carefully neutral, though my heart pounded in my chest. "I'll be transitioning to chairman of the board," my father continued, focusing on our strategic partnerships while Trevor guides our day-to-day operations and growth strategy. The future of Hunter Medical couldn't be in better hands. Trevor stepped forward, straightening his tie. "Thank you, Dad. It's an honor to accept this responsibility and to continue the Hunter legacy of innovation and leadership." He launched into a clearly rehearsed speech about his vision for the company's future, the strategic partnerships he planned to develop, and the growth targets he'd set. Not once did he mention me or acknowledge my role in developing the technologies that had revitalized the company. "In conclusion," Trevor said, "I'm humbled by the opportunity to lead this extraordinary company into its next chapter. I've learned so much watching my father build this business, and I intend to honor that legacy by ensuring Hunter Medical remains at the forefront of medical technology innovation for decades to come." Polite applause followed. Several board members, the newer additions who were Trevor's friends, nodded enthusiastically. Others looked uncomfortable, stealing glances in my direction. "Thank you, Trevor," my father said, beaming with pride. "Are there any questions or comments before we move to formally ratify this appointment?" The room was silent until I slowly raised my hand. My father's smile faltered slightly. "Yes, Ilene?" I stood, smoothing my skirt as I did. "I'd like to say a few words if that's all right." My father nodded, though his expression suggested he hoped I would simply offer congratulations and sit back down. "First, I want to acknowledge the milestone we've reached. $50 million in valuation is indeed worth celebrating." I smiled, looking around the room. When I joined Hunter Medical 12 years ago, we were a $2 million company with outdated products and shrinking market share. The transformation we've undergone is remarkable. Several people nodded in agreement. "I'd like to clarify a few points for the record," I continued. "The glucose monitoring system that marked our first major pivot was developed by my team under my direct leadership. The cardiac prediction technology that now accounts for 70% of our revenue was conceived, designed, and implemented under my direction, with patents held by Ilene Hunter LLC and licensed to Hunter Medical Innovations." My father shifted uncomfortably. Trevor's smile had completely disappeared. "Additionally," I said, "our 10 largest client relationships, including Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, and Johns Hopkins, were cultivated through my personal efforts and are maintained through my ongoing involvement." "Ilene," my father interrupted, "this isn't the time for listing individual contributions. This is about the future of the company as a whole. I couldn't agree more, I replied calmly. Which is why I think the board should be fully informed before making decisions about that future. I opened the folder I'd brought with me, removing several documents. These are the licensing agreements between Hunter Medical Innovations and Ilene Hunter LLC for the cardiac monitoring technology, the predictive analytics platform, and the miniaturized sensor designs. As you'll note in Section 8.3, these licenses can be revoked with 30 days' notice. The room erupted in confused murmurs. What are you saying, Ilene? My father demanded, his face flushing. I'm saying that as of this moment, I am tendering my resignation from Hunter Medical Innovations. Furthermore, I am giving 30 days' notice of my intent to revoke the technology licenses granted to this company. The shock in the room was palpable. Trevor's face had gone from confident to panicked in seconds. You can't do that, he sputtered. Those technologies belong to the company. A family business, I repeated. Is that why I was excluded from the family meeting where you decided Trevor would be CEO regardless of merit or contribution? Is that why you've consistently given him credit for my innovations? Is that why you've been meeting with lawyers to try to invalidate my patent rights? This is absurd, my father said, his voice rising. This is a family business. You can't just walk away and take everything with you. Murmurs of approval rippled through the room. My father smiled, placing his hand on Trevor's shoulder. My father's face went white. How did you? You can't do that, he sputtered. Those technologies belong to the company. I turned to address the entire board. I didn't want it to come to this. I've given 12 years of my life to Hunter Medical. I've worked 80-hour weeks, sacrificed my personal life, and poured every ounce of creativity and determination I possess into saving and growing this company. All I ever wanted was recognition and a fair opportunity to lead based on merit. Several board members nodded, looking increasingly uncomfortable. Instead, I was told repeatedly that technical expertise doesn't qualify one for leadership, that some people are natural leaders, regardless of their actual contributions or commitment. I gathered my papers and stood straight. I'll be establishing a new company focused on the next generation of predictive medical technology. My core team has already indicated their intention to join me. Our clients have relationships with me personally, not with the Hunter name. The room had gone completely silent. Then my father suddenly clutched at his chest, his face contorted in pain. He reached for his water glass but knocked it over, sending it shattering to the floor. I know everything, I said quietly. The plans to ease me out after the transition. The efforts to undermine my ownership of my own innovations. The attempts to rewrite the company history, to make Trevor the mastermind behind our growth. Get his medication, my mother's voice echoed in my mind. Left inside jacket pocket. I reached inside his suit jacket as Trevor called for someone to dial 911. The small pill bottle was exactly where my mother had said it would be. With trembling fingers, I opened it and placed a tablet under my father's tongue. Dad? Trevor and I both moved toward him simultaneously. As the doors closed behind them, I turned back to the stunned boardroom. I'll postpone my formal resignation until we know my father is stable, I said quietly. But my decision stands. The next moments were chaos. The ambulance arrived quickly, paramedics rushing in with a stretcher. As they wheeled my father out, his eyes locked with mine for a brief moment. The look of betrayal and shock in them would haunt me for weeks to come. No, Trevor, I replied. I'm protecting what I built. There's a difference. My father survived the heart attack, though his doctors called it a significant cardiac event. He remained in the hospital for a week, with strict orders to avoid stress upon his return home. The irony wasn't lost on me that the monitoring technology I'd developed could have predicted his heart attack hours before it happened. I visited him daily in the hospital, though our conversations were strained and brief. My mother oscillated between worry for him and disappointment in me. How could you do this to your father? She asked on the third day, as we sat in the hospital cafeteria. Trevor, his face ashen, looked at me with a mixture of anger and desperation. You can't do this. You'll destroy everything he built. You know what I mean, Ilene. The company means everything to him. It's his legacy. A legacy he was willing to hand to Trevor without consideration for who actually built its current value, I said, trying to keep the bitterness from my voice. Trevor's face reddened. Our legal team is reviewing those agreements. We believe they won't hold up to scrutiny. The technology was developed while Ilene was employed here. Even when the son has contributed virtually nothing while the daughter rebuilt the entire company? She looked at me then, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. I'm not saying it's right, Ilene. I'm just explaining how he sees it. I didn't do this to him, Mom. His condition has been developing for years. According to his doctors, nothing has changed. He insisted to the gathered leadership team. My father will recover, and the transition plan will proceed. In the meantime, I'll be taking on CEO responsibilities. What about the licensing issues Ilene raised? Laura asked. If she revokes those licenses, what happens to our product line? Back at Hunter Medical, chaos had erupted. In the wake of the aborted board meeting, Trevor, attempting to assert his authority as the announced but not formally appointed CEO, called an emergency executive meeting through her separate LLC, Marcus pointed out, which has distinct contracts with Hunter Medical. I've seen those agreements. They're solid. Whose side are you on? Trevor demanded. Marcus stood up slowly. I'm on the side of this company succeeding. But success requires understanding our actual situation, not wishful thinking. The meeting deteriorated from there. By the end of the day, whispers of an uncertain future spread throughout the company. The stock price, which had been climbing steadily on rumors of the 50 million valuation milestone, dropped 12% in a single afternoon. The next morning, Jason, Laura, and Marcus came to my office together. They closed the door behind them. We need to know your plans, Jason said without preamble. The company's in freefall, and we need to make decisions. Trevor's face reddened. Our legal team is reviewing those agreements. We believe they won't hold up to scrutiny. The technology was developed while Ilene was employed here. Will we have equity? Laura asked. Yes. Founding team members will have significant equity stakes. This won't be another family business where loyalty goes unrecognized. They exchanged glances. We're in, Marcus said. When do we start? I've given 30 days notice on the technology licenses. My new company, Foresight Medical, will be operational by then. Later that day, Trevor stormed into my office. 6 vice presidents just submitted their resignations. 6, all citing future uncertainty as the reason. That's unfortunate, I said calmly. Did you approach them? Are you poaching our executives? I haven't spoken to any vice presidents about joining my new venture, I said truthfully. People make their own decisions based on what they observe. That's unfortunate, I said calmly. I appreciated their directness. I meant what I said in the board meeting. I'm establishing a new company focused on next-generation predictive medical technology. I want all 3 of you with me, but I understand if you need to make different choices. For a moment, I thought Trevor might actually break down. You have to stop this, he pleaded. Dad's in the hospital. The company's falling apart. Is this really what you want? To destroy your own family's business out of spite? This isn't spite, Trevor. This is the natural consequence of decisions made by you and Dad. You chose to dismiss my contributions. You chose to plan my eventual removal. You chose to try to take credit for work you didn't do. We can fix this, he said, his voice dropping. You can still have a leadership role. Co-CEO. Maybe. We can work something out. The offer might have tempted me once, but not anymore. It's too late, Trevor. The trust is gone, and without trust, there's no foundation for working together. As he left, shoulders slumped in defeat. I felt a surprising twinge of sympathy. Trevor had been raised to believe the company would be his birthright. He'd never been pushed to earn it or to understand the work that went into building something valuable. In many ways, he was as much a victim of our father's outdated values as I was. The next 2 weeks brought a cascade of challenges for Hunter Medical. 3 major clients formally notified the company of their intent to terminate contracts, citing concerns about continuity of technology and support. The stock dropped another 18%. The board called emergency meetings almost daily, trying to chart a path forward. I visited my father again as he recovered at home. He sat in his study, looking smaller somehow, diminished by recent events. "The Andrews Group is threatening to pull their $5 million investment," he said without preamble. "Apparently, they're concerned about our intellectual property position." I sat across from him, saying nothing. "Is this what you wanted? To dismantle everything I've built?" "I built the company's current value, Dad. Not you. And certainly not Trevor. I turned a failing $2 million business into one approaching $50 million. And all I got in return was being sidelined for your predetermined successor." He looked away. "You're my daughter. You were always taken care of. Always had a place in the company. A place, but never the place I earned." He was silent for a long moment. "What will it take to end this? To keep the technology licenses? And stop the exodus?" "Nothing," I said simply. "I'm not doing this as a negotiating tactic. I'm doing it because it's time for me to build something where my contributions will be properly valued." A knock at the door interrupted us. My mother entered, followed by my sister Rachel, who had flown in from Chicago when she heard about Dad's heart attack. "The Andrews Group is threatening to pull their $5 million investment," he said without preamble. "Apparently, they're concerned about our intellectual property position." "This has gone far enough," Rachel said, looking between us. "The whole family is being torn apart." A knock at the door interrupted us. My mother entered, followed by my sister Rachel, who had flown in from Chicago when she heard about Dad's heart attack. My mother sat beside my father, taking his hand. "Frank, she's right. You've always had a blind spot when it comes to the children. Trevor was always your favorite, the son you wanted to follow in your footsteps. But Ilene is the one who truly inherited your drive, your innovation, spirit." My father pulled his hand away. "This isn't about favorites. It's about what's best for the company." "Stay out of this, Rachel," my father warned. "You don't understand the business implications." The confrontation continued. Years of family dynamics finally laid bare. By the end, my father looked exhausted. But something had shifted. For perhaps the first time, he'd been forced to hear uncomfortable truths from those he couldn't simply dismiss. As I was leaving, Trevor arrived. He pulled me aside in the hallway, his expression grave. "We need to talk," he said. "Privately. It's about the company finances." "Is the company better off now?" Rachel asked pointedly. "Stock in free fall. Executives resigning. Clients jumping ship. How is that what's best?" "There are some financial issues that aren't in the official reports," he admitted. "Dad and we've been managing certain aspects of the accounting to make our position look stronger than it is." "What are you talking about?" I asked, alarm bells ringing. We went to the back porch, away from the others. Trevor paced nervously before finally speaking. I stared at him in disbelief. "That's accounting fraud, Trevor. The Johnson Medical acquisition last year? We never fully integrated their technology because it didn't work as advertised. But we've been carrying it on the books at full value." The implications were staggering. If what Trevor was saying was true, Hunter Medical had deeper problems than a leadership struggle or technology licenses. They were potentially facing regulatory violations and shareholder lawsuits. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "The offer might have tempted me once, but not anymore. It's too late, Trevor. The trust is gone. And without trust, There's no foundation for working together. I felt sick. Despite everything, I'd never wanted to see Hunter Medical collapse. It was still my family's legacy, still the company where I'd spent 12 years of my career. Does Dad know you're telling me this? Trevor shook his head. No. And it would kill him if he knew I had. But I don't know what else to do. Everything's falling apart. Trevor looked defeated. Because it's all going to come out now. The board is ordering a full audit. In light of recent events, they want to understand exactly what assets the company has and what it might lose if your licenses are revoked. The choice I made would affect not just my career, but my entire family, hundreds of employees and thousands of patients who relied on our technology. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of Foresight Medical's new headquarters, watching as workers installed our company logo on the wall. The stylized F, formed from interlinked DNA strands, symbolized our focus on predictive healthcare through genetic and biometric monitoring. In just half a year, we had secured $30 million in funding, assembled a team of 60 employees, and signed partnership agreements with 5 major hospital systems. Our first product, an enhanced version of my cardiac monitoring system, was already in clinical trials. The path to this moment had been neither simple nor painless. After Trevor's revelation about Hunter Medical's financial irregularities, I'd faced an agonizing moral dilemma. My instinct for self-preservation warred with my sense of responsibility toward the company I'd helped build and the people who worked there. In the end, I'd chosen a middle path. Miss Hunter? My assistant's voice interrupted my thoughts. Your father is here for your 2 o'clock meeting. I nodded, taking a deep breath. Send him in. My father looked better than he had in months. The color had returned to his face, and he'd lost weight on his doctor's orders. He surveyed the lobby with appraising eyes. Impressive, he said as we walked toward my office. You've accomplished a lot in 6 months. Thank you, I replied simply. My office overlooked the Charles River, with windows that filled the room with natural light. We sat at the small conference table rather than across my desk, a deliberate choice to put us on equal footing. The Hunter Medical Board approved the partnership proposal, he said, sliding a folder across the table. All the terms you requested have been accepted. I opened the folder and skimmed the document, though I already knew what it contained. A strategic partnership between Foresight Medical and a restructured Hunter Medical Innovations. We would license our advanced technologies to them for specific applications, while maintaining ownership and the freedom to develop new markets independently. And Trevor's role? I asked. My father sighed. As agreed. He's stepping down from any executive position. The board has appointed Sandra Michaels as CEO. Trevor will remain on the board, but with no operational responsibilities. This had been one of my non-negotiable conditions. After the financial irregularities came to light through a carefully managed internal investigation, we had both agreed that Trevor needed to step back and learn business from the ground up. He's doing well at Johnson & Johnson, my father added. Starting in product management, learning the actual operations instead of just the executive view. He calls it humbling but necessary. As I drove home that night, I faced my most difficult decision yet. I could proceed with my plans for Foresight Medical, allowing Hunter Medical to potentially implode from its financial irregularities. Or I could find a way to protect the company's future while still establishing my independence and the recognition I deserved. My father nodded, a gesture that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. The heart attack and subsequent company crisis had forced him to reevaluate many of his long-held beliefs. Your mother wants to know if you'll come to Sunday dinner this weekend, he said, changing the subject. Rachel will be in town with the kids. I'll be there, I promised. Our family relationships were healing slowly. There were still moments of tension, still unspoken resentments, but we were finding a new equilibrium. The cardiac prediction system saved 3 lives at Mass General last month, my father said, pride evident in his voice. The doctors said without the early warning, those patients wouldn't have made it. I smiled. That's why we do this work. Not for valuations or titles, but for impact. He looked down at his hands. I was wrong, Ilene. About many things. I was so fixated on tradition and my predetermined ideas about leadership that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. Coming from my father, this was as close to an apology as I would ever get. I've been thinking a lot about legacy, he continued. What it really means. I always thought it was about the Hunter name, continuing through Trevor taking over. But a true legacy is about impact, about leaving something meaningful behind. Your innovations have saved lives. That's a legacy that matters far more than who sits in the CEO chair. We spent the next hour discussing the partnership details. Hunter Medical would focus on surgical and therapeutic devices, building on their original strength, while Foresight would lead in predictive and monitoring technology. The collaboration would allow both companies to thrive in their respective areas of expertise. As our meeting concluded, my father paused at the door. You know, when you walked out with your team and the patents, I finally realized something I should have seen years ago. What's that? I asked. You were the company. Not the Hunter name, not the building, not even the products themselves. The real value was in your vision and determination. He smiled ruefully. It took losing everything to make me see it. After he left, I walked to the window, looking out at the river. The journey from project manager to founder and CEO had been harder and more painful than I could have ever anticipated. But standing in my own company, leading a team that valued merit over nepotism, I felt a sense of peace I'd never experienced at Hunter Medical. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason. Pediatric monitoring prototype test successful. Results better than projected. I smiled. Our expansion into pediatric monitoring would open entirely new markets. And, more importantly, help protect children with congenital heart conditions. This was the future I had fought for, the freedom to pursue my vision without artificial constraints. Later that afternoon, I led a mentoring session with young women engineers from local universities, a program I'd established to support the next generation of female innovators. Sharing my story always prompted interesting questions. We spent the next hour discussing the partnership details. Hunter Medical would focus on surgical and therapeutic devices, building on their original strength, while Foresight would lead in predictive and monitoring technology. The collaboration would allow both companies to thrive in their respective areas of expertise. Do you regret not fighting harder to become CEO of your family's company? One student asked. Was it worth the family conflict? Another asked. Conflict is sometimes necessary for growth, I replied. My father and I understand each other better now than we ever did when I worked for him. And my brother is finally learning what it means to earn his opportunities rather than expecting them as his birthright. Sometimes relationships need to break before they can heal properly. As the session ended, I reflected on the most important lesson of my journey. True success isn't measured by titles or even dollar valuations. It's measured by impact, by the difference your work makes in the world, and by creating environments where talent and determination are recognized and rewarded. Hunter Medical still exists, now with professional management and a clearer sense of its strengths. Foresight Medical is growing rapidly, with a culture built on merit and innovation. And most importantly, the technologies that both companies develop continue to save lives daily. I didn't need to destroy my family's company to prove my worth. In the end, I created something new that enhanced, rather than erased, our family legacy. The $50 million company I helped build continues, while the new vision I'm pursuing promises even greater impact. Sometimes walking away from what doesn't serve you is the most powerful step you can take toward creating what truly matters. My father finally recognized that I was the heart of the company he thought was his alone. But more importantly, I recognized that my value wasn't dependent on his acknowledgement. It existed independently, waiting for me to claim it. Have you ever had to walk away from something familiar to claim your true worth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most meaningful growth. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of personal and professional transformation. And if you know someone struggling to be recognized for their contributions, share this with them as a reminder that sometimes creating your own path is the most powerful response to being undervalued. Thank you for listening, and remember that your worth isn't determined by others' recognition. It's inherent in who you are and what you create.